that's our learning opportunity, and that's the space where we can operate to work with uncertainty.
Technology is transforming how we think, how we lead, and how we win. From Intervision, this is Status Go, the show helping IT leaders move beyond the status quo, master their craft, and propel their IT vision. Business is filled with peaks and valleys. For most of us, the year 2020 has been a deep, deep valley. The year has been filled with challenges. The year has been filled with uncertainty. The future is uncertain, but it feels like the future ahead of us is even more uncertain than ever. I'm your host, Jeff Tunn, and today on Status Go, we are going to explore that uncertainty. Who better to help guide us than someone who takes leaders into the face of that uncertainty intentionally? Matt Walker is a professional mountain climber who has scaled the largest peaks on earth and now uses that experience to help leaders overcome challenges in their professional and personal life by adventuring in the world's most difficult environments. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thanks, Jeff. It's great to be with you.
I'm really excited about our conversation today, Matt. I can honestly say you are the first mountain climber we've ever had on this show, at least as far as we know, unless someone didn't fess up to that while we were talking to him. But I just can't wait to dig in.
Right on.
So let's start with your background. How did you get into mountain climbing and adventuring in the first place?
Yeah, so for me, it actually started in high school. I grew up in New Jersey. Didn't grow up in a family that was oriented towards camping or mountain climbing or outdoors. But when I was in high school, I had an opportunity to take an outward bound course and took to it. Really enjoyed being out, and it was the first time I think I really faced adversity head on, and the mental challenge of questioning, even just becoming aware of like where is my personal line, where is it that I can um, push further than I think I'm capable. And I did that course, and then from there decided I really wanted to take it on, as deeply as I could. And so I went to university in Washington State, and then dove headfirst into mountain climbing and made it my career. Along that way, I realized that what I really wanted to do was connect the dots between personal and professional leadership and the outdoor experience. So went and got a master's degree in behavioral science, and now that's the work I do: connect those two fields together.
So that's an interesting connection. When did you start thinking that what you wanted to do with that passion was use those gifts in leadership development?
I mean, I have to say it was really early on, and I think that was because of the mentors that I was surrounded with, um, that were framing these experiences in a way that was larger than just um, getting from point A to point B, from the trailhead to the summit and back. When I was initially exposed to mountain climbing, I think it was the first time I really felt um, this deep human connection to others in terms of camaraderie and teamwork, and the a true interchange of dependence on each other, and showing up larger and fuller in order to take care of each other and to reach larger goals. So for me, it started pretty early on.
Because you're in those environments, you are your life is in the hands of your teammates, right? I mean, pretty much in some of those circumstances.
That's right, and vice versa, right? So it's like you're
Yeah.
depending on them, and then you have to show up fully too. And so what I found that the demands right off the bat is transparency and communication. Really clear communication as to what is happening in the moment. That's from a technical perspective. That means that it is literally life and death from a technical perspective. but also in terms of your own self awareness. You know, how are you feeling? What's your health like? What's your energy like? What are you capable of doing this climb? Are you fit enough? So you know, being able to have that high level of self awareness. So it was a combination of those attributes that then connects you deeper in terms of your relationship with people than I had ever experienced elsewhere. And what I found is that that actually really set me up for deeper relationships in my own business and in terms of partnership and choosing teams to be part of and collaborations.
So when did you start the leadership development part of your business? And let me rephrase that, because I assume that you were doing mountain climbing before you started the leadership development per se. So when did you make that pivot and start doing the adventuring and the mountain climbing for leadership development?
Yeah, so I started right as I finished college. I went into mountain guiding as a full time career and focused on guiding the seven summits, the highest point on each continent. Um, and in doing so, I really focused just on the technical aspects and then my own personal leadership and how to lead teams in that environment and how to support individuals on those teams to you know not only to their own success but then to also being solid team members. So I did that for about 10 years or so full time. I like to say at that point I was either living in a van, um, living living on the floor of a friend's house, or out of duffel bags in some random country around the world. So it was
Mhm.
pretty transient work, but it was great, and I really enjoyed it. And at the same time, what I noticed was there was a gap between taking the lessons learned from these experiences and applying them to a personal and professional space. And so that's when about 10 years into it, I decided to take a couple years off and focus on a more formal education, and then work to apply it. So all told, I've been formally teaching this material as a leadership tool for about 12 years or so.
And so during that time, I know you work with leaders, CEOs, individual contributors from a wide variety of industry and professions, including information technology and tech, the tech sector.
Right.
What are some of the common threads that you see in these groups of leaders as you work with them to venture into uncertainty and the unknown?
Yeah, I'd say some of the largest common thread, if I can speak specifically about in the tech industry, I'll go there first. Whether it's from a leadership perspective or on the engineering side, um, the largest, the most frequent common thread is our attempts to control the uncontrollable, to put systems into place um, that try to corral and keep information and our actions um, as specific and repeatable as possible.
Hmm.
And the friction there, just as we look at a year like this, is that the friction occurs when we attempt to have systems in place that are no longer applicable to the environment that we're functioning in. And that comes twofold: one, in our projects and workload, and how we approach those, and then also how we approach the teams that we operate with and as individuals. So the human aspect and the technical side get thrown off when we try to hold too rigid a space. And that is a theme that I've seen repeated frequently in the tech sector, both from a business and operations perspective and from a technical application.
So I'm curious, as someone who guides these teams on these adventures. I assume you're running into all sorts of skill levels. Have you gotten into a situation with a group that was kind of like, oh crap, we're now a little bit out of control, and it's testing even you and your skills?
So I try to. That's a great question. Um, I'm going to say no to the testing of my skills because that would put me in a place where I was kind of lost control of the situation,
Mhm.
and then I've lost the learning opportunity. But the perception of challenge and the perception of loss of control is frequently there by the participants, and that is where the real learning takes place. So. Um, Oftentimes what I will do is set up scenarios or set up adventure experiences that will push the individuals and the teams to a breaking point. Um, but it's done in a way where we are just moving over the line where we can still maintain a learning environment, and we're not pushing
Ah,
so far that we move out of that. So we, if you think of concentric circles, we've got a zone in the middle, which is kind of our safe, comfort, known entity, and then the next
yeah,
circle out from that is where learning takes place, where we're pushed out of our comfort zone into a space where there's learning. And the next circle out of that is overwhelm. And so if we you got to try and keep that needle somewhere right in the line there in that learning area. And I think if anything, 2020 has really shown us what happens to us as individuals and organizations when we spend too much time in that third ring of uncertainty and overwhelm. And when we hit that third ring, there is no learning taking place. And the only way to move through that is to go back to the center point of comfort. So, um, I think what we're finding this year in particular is that that middle ring of learning is pretty narrow, and we're kind of hair triggered into overwhelm really quickly, which is,
yeah.
if we pause for a moment, that's really that's our learning opportunity, and that's the space where we can operate to work with uncertainty.
Yeah, that reminds me of a time several years ago that I took. I was not the guide by any stretch. I was one of the adults on the trip with a group of high school kids, and we took them on a whitewater trip up in Canada, very remote. Um, and we divided into three groups, and it was we got kind of worried in the middle group because we lost contact with the group that was behind us,
Mm-hmm.
and come to find out, the leader of that group, the guide, one of the professional guides, had decided that to go on that trip was going to exceed the limits that that group of kids could do. So they just did day trips from an island, and they didn't have any really way of letting our guides know until the very end. But it goes with what you were saying, is you don't want to take the group too far. You want them to have an experience and learn, but you're not going to put people's health and safety at risk.
That's right. I like what that story brings forward for me is the missing component there of communication, and
Hmm.
how I'm sure anxiety provoking that was for both sets of
Oh yes,
guides to not, and for the
yes,
participants to not know what's happening with the other party. Um,
yeah,
and I think back on some of the organizations that I worked with. I'm gonna just leave them nameless at the moment, but organizations that I worked with this spring, substantial tech organizations that made the specific decision to operate with high level of transparency in terms of how they were going to handle um, work from home, how they were going to handle their office space and their real estate, their offices, how they were going to handle hiring moving forward. Um, some pay structure changes, but doing everything so over the top transparently, that what that did was that gave everybody information and knowledge that allowed them to ease into and feel more comfortable in the uncertainty, having held that information instead of withholding it.
yeah,
And those organizations are thriving right now as a result of that, as opposed to trying to muscle their way through it and kind of keep the original structure. So
yeah. That communication is so important. That communication with transparency.
And explanation, the story that you just told, there may have been technical issues that kept them from communicating, um,
Hmm.
and at the same time, I think it brings up the question for us, as in terms of a learning opportunity, is what could have been done differently to
Yeah.
ease that anxiety? Because I can only imagine how stressful that was.
It was pretty
Yeah.
stressful. I was the adult leader, and my son was in that group that was behind
Oh,
us.
that's even worse.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, oh yeah. So I was a pretty nervous dad for several
I'm
days
sure.
as we finished that. But yeah, it was a learning experience. That's for sure. So one of the things that I know you talk a lot about, Matt, in the conversations that you and I have had, is the concept or the importance of self care. And you touched on that a little bit when you were talking about the beginnings of your career and knowing and understanding your limits and that. But it's something that we as leaders tend not to spend much time on. We're most of the time we're more focused on our teams. You know, the concept of servant leadership is that it's all about our teams and all that. So let's start with, what's your definition of self-care?
Yeah, thank you for about the introducing with the idea of the definition of self care. I want to start by describing what self care is not, because I think it's easy to hear the word self care and to think, like a massage and a spa and a hot tub and kind of like the pampering side of self care. Like that's the trope of self care.
Hey,
Um,
I saw Eiger Sanction. I know how it really is on those
yeah,
mountains.
for me, self care starts. It's I just hit on this. Self care for me starts in the mountains. In a at the I use this phrase frequently. Is that lunch ends when I mean sorry lunch begins when breakfast ends, and lunch ends when dinner begins. So
Hmm.
lunch begins when breakfast ends, and lunch ends when dinner begins. And what I mean by that is that you are responsible throughout the entirety of the day to take care of your own nutrition and self. So
Yeah,
your blood
yeah.
sugar, your hydration, you know, your temperature, going to the bathroom, all those things, that is your responsibility for the entirety of the day. So if I take that same methodology and apply it to the leadership space, we have to you have to know yourself and recognize how taking care of yourself impacts the team. So it's the same idea as like you put your mask on first before helping others. If we don't
Hmm.
have awareness of how we are being impacted by stressors, anxiety, and uncertainty, then our leadership is impacted by that and turns is becomes pretty poor. So
Yeah.
when I talk about self care, what I start with is really just an awareness of what happens to us physically and what happens to us emotionally when we are redlined and hit overwhelm. And how does that impact our team? So if talking about those concentric circles again, if we can
Hmm.
maintain that core sense of self and be able to make adjustments so that we don't reach overwhelm, we are then able to move into that traditional model of servant leadership. But if we can't even contain our own space and our own sense of self, then our ability to lead others is out the window. So um, for me, self care is really boils down to literally like knowing thyself, like knowing your ability to what happens internally and physically in your own body. So it really is like movement and exercise and eating well and sleeping well, and taking care of ourselves in those basic ways. But it's also having the awareness of what our personal values are and how those show up as actions in the world. And so that awareness of what actions we're taking and why is a form of self-care that then translates to how we show up as leaders. So if we have an awareness of that, we can then actually lead with much more efficacy and much more a higher level of respect and responsibility towards our teams.
What are some of the signs that I might be seeing in myself if I've crossed into that next concentric circle and I'm getting into a danger zone with myself personally? What are some of the things that I might be seeing, feeling
Yeah.
within
So
myself?
I'd say that the two big things that are on opposite sides of the spectrum um, are a quick fuse, so quick to anger, quick to frustration, high increased blood pressure, that kind of feeling of like of overwhelm and anxiety. Um, and then the opposite of that, which can occur at the same time, is indecision. So if you're sitting on decisions and you're not sure how to make them or what the best course of action is, that's a significant marker of being out of alignment. So if you're taking care of yourself physically and you have your the mental and emotional capacity to be grounded, to know that your values and your actions are in alignment, then decision making actually is very straightforward. Things will fall into place very with considerable clarity. Your yeses are yeses and your nos are nos. And when you're in the middle ground, you're not sure what to do and you're feeling pushed or pulled. It's because that mental compass is out of alignment, and then we end up feeling stuck. So it's a combination of either feeling that like high level of indecisiveness, or quick to anger, quick to frustration, and over feeling of overwhelm.
So, as you work with leaders, especially this year with all of the chaos that has been around us this year, what are some things that you recommend to them that they should be doing in terms of self care? What are some of the things that they should be doing?
Well, one of the best things that we could do for ourselves is actually not to start our work first in the morning. So whatever time we actually clock in and start working, it's not to dig into our work. The very best thing that we can do for ourselves would be to literally um, use whatever tools we have, whether it's a journal, whether it's a paper calendar, a notepad, whatever it is, but something that we where we can kind of brain dump and release the noise and the chatter that's in our brain, and get down onto paper what are the most important things that need to be accomplished for that day and why. So it's literally just the smallest step of taking 5 minutes, taking 7 minutes to breathe, to take full breaths, to sit in some calm, and catalog how is it that you're going to spend your day today, as opposed to the opposite of that, which is just opening your email, driving your phone, and just starting to be in a responsive, reactive place. Instead, it's the very best thing we can do is starting our day with planning and then ending our day with reflection. If we gave ourselves literally 7 to 10 minutes in the morning and 7 to 10 minutes in the evening of those two activities, the planning and then reflection, our entire workload and way of being would shift dramatically. And it's amazing what can, if you did this for 10 days for 20 minutes total per day, your workload and way of being would dramatically shift. um, Instead, we were so easily triggered to be responsive
Oh,
that it really impacts our ability to show up.
we need that we need that time to pause and reflect, and that's kind of been one of my key words for 2020. Actually, a dear friend of mine sent me a note early on in the year about taking time to pause, and man, that has been kind of my mantra for the year, is when I'm starting to feel uh, um, maybe quick to anger because I didn't push record on a video, as I was talking about off the air a little bit
Right,
ago,
right.
is to push that pause and to stop and reflect. Right, that is so important, and I appreciate that you bring that to your work as well, and you work with leaders. Uh, 5 minutes isn't that much. 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at night is not that much to ask to take that time out.
It's really not. And what I find is, in my work, so the goal of my work is to take people outside of their everyday experience and just hold a mirror of reflection. So to put
Mhm.
them in a space where they can experience challenge that's not directly tied to their workload, and they hold a mirror to see how it is that they respond to that experience. What are their habituated responses? So, like, what's their habituated way of being, and then what's a new way of being? What's a way that they can correct that to show up a little bit differently?
Mhm.
And this exercise, which has been done for millennia, I mean, this is nothing new or revolutionary at all. What we're really just asking is to take a few moments to breathe, and then to put pen to paper and do some reflection and some planning. It sounds insanely elementary, and yet very few of us do it. And I, even as a practitioner of leadership, I'm challenged to do it consistently as well. Like, I have to make it a literally a practice that I hold myself accountable to doing. And I slip and have big gaps of time when I don't do it as well. But we're talking about what I would do is I would really encourage your listeners to just attempt it for a week, 5 days,
Yeah.
3 days, something very, very simple, and see what happens to internally. See what happens to that sense of overwhelm when they're not in a reactive space. See what happens in their bodies. See what happens to the shift
Yeah.
in workload by carving out 20 minutes, 10 in the front and 10 in the back of the day.
Well, and I imagine, Matt, that you can tell in yourself when you do slip and not do it for some period of time.
Oh,
You can feel
absolutely.
the difference in yourself.
Absolutely. It completely shifts the people that would answer that question with even more clarity would be my children. Um, because they see,
Uh,
they see the direct result of that when when I do have that practice where I am grounded in the morning and then have closure at the end of the day. My way of being and my approach to parenting is significantly different. Um,
yeah.
and so that bleeds out into how we show up with our significant others, with our partners, with those that we work with, and our teams is literally. Um, I know I'm repeating myself here, but it is insanely elementary and incredibly impactful to take 7 to 10 minutes in the morning and 7 to 10 in the afternoon. If I could leave an indelible mark in the world and just have that as my
As your
repeated
take,
mantra,
as your world takeaway.
yeah,
Yeah.
that would be it.
Yeah.
If I could move through the world and just touch people by saying, do this
Yeah.
one
Take a
exercise.
few minutes. Yeah.
You don't need to
Yeah.
read any of these other leadership books. You don't need to do any of these other planning tools. Just this exercise. It really does have that significant impact. And we are in a tumultuous time. Like, our news
Yeah.
feed and experience in the world politically is in turmoil. There's a tremendous amount of uncertainty with world health
Hmm.
and the markets, and so having that ability to just to be able to ground and then react, and then take action from a place of alignment. Wow, everyone is going to notice the difference,
Yeah.
including you.
So you that's probably the answer to this next question that I wanted to ask, because you use that word again of uncertainty, and we are definitely in uncertain times. And as we're recording this, it's nearing the start of Q4, so a lot of people are starting to make plans for 2021, which is even more uncertain. So, when you work with leaders to be the best leaders that they can be, what can you teach them? What can a leader do to help his or her organization to better manage that uncertainty as we go into 2021?
Yeah, I think there's two. I'm going to answer with two things. One is, are your values and actions in alignment? And so this comes from two different perspectives. Are the actions you're taking as a leader, as an individual, as a human, in alignment with your values?
Mhm.
If they're not, what can you do to change that? So, oftentimes this comes in a way of just looking at your calendar. Like, am I saying yes to things that are in alignment with my values? So if things need to shift, then they need to shift. And then from an organizational perspective, as you're looking, at the end of Q4, moving into Q1, um, as an organization, as a team, are we acting and making decisions that are in accordance, in alignment with the values of the organization? So as things pop up and we have to make decisions, it should be really easy to make those decisions as a yes or no based on that formula. So
Mhm.
both as a leader, as an individual, are your values and actions in alignment, and two, as a team and as an organization. And if we have clarity in those places, then our choices and our mode of operating fall into place really smoothly. The second part of your question was around managing uncertainty. And I think the very best thing we can do is just acknowledge that we are constantly and always have been in a place of uncertainty. It's just
Yeah.
way exaggerated right now and on a much faster timeline. So when the values and the actions pieces, both as an individual and as a team and as an org, are in alignment, the uncertainty component actually doesn't really matter anymore. We can ignore that. It's when we're out of alignment with our values and actions that we then fixate on the uncertainty, because we need something to externalize to be able to make
Mhm.
sense or blame. And so we go to uncertainty for that. We blame the markets. We blame um, we blame politics. We blame the COVID situation. We have all these other reasons, other things we can place blame on as a result of our values and actions not in alignment. But when those things are in alignment as an individual and as a team, then we actually really no longer, while the uncertainty is there, we no longer focus on it. We just don't need to, because things are flowing in place as they should.
Well, it kind of goes back to the story you told at the beginning of the tech leader who decided, or the leadership part of the organization decided to be overly communicative and fully transparent, because that probably aligned with their values.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been one of the measures of that organization dealing with this uncertainty. So that's a great wraparound back to the beginning. Um, Here on Status Go, we are all about action. And I know, Matt, you more than most can appreciate action. We want to leave our listeners with an explicit call to action. So, what are one or two things our listeners should do tomorrow because they listened to us today?
I'm going to leave with two things. One is passive and one is active. So the passive thing would be, for the next 3 days, carve out 10 minutes in the morning, 10 in the evening, to breathe and to open the day, not get digital, put pen to paper, release the things that are in your brain, kind of put them on paper, and make sure that the actions you're going to take that day are in alignment with your values. And then conclude the day with the same thing, with some journaling, some reflection. What were you successful at? What do you need to attend to tomorrow? So that's the passive one. The active one is to email me. So Matt at mattwalkeradventure.com. And Jeff, you can throw the link in the show notes,
Absolutely.
and email me, and I will reply back with a 10-day challenge that will go deeper into defining one specific area of your life, as a leader, that we're going to that you will step that you'll challenge yourself to be held accountable to. And so I've got a spreadsheet that I'll send back that has an accountability chart attached to it. And since I don't personally know any of the people who are going to be emailing me, to me, that's just a name behind an email. It allows us to
Hmm.
be able to have a deeper level of accountability, and go a little bit deeper and more sincere in the topic. And so it's a 10-day challenge, um, to deeply align your values and your actions. So those are the two components that I would ask your listeners to consider, either the reflective piece and the planning aspect, or to dive into the 10-day challenge in connecting values and actions.
That is a those are both great actions, and don't be surprised when you get an email from me, man.
I look forward to it.
I'm serious. I may take you up on that 10-day challenge. That sounds fascinating. So, Matt, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be on the show. I know 2020 has been chaotic for your business. It's been chaotic for your family, like for many folks around the country. And I really appreciate you carving out the time to chat.
Thank you, Jeff. I really enjoyed it, and look forward to hearing about your 10-day challenge. And I'll up the ante and join you on it. We'll do it together.
Hey, there you go. There you go. That sounds great. To our listeners out there, I want you to accept the challenge. And if you have a question or want to learn more, visit intervision.com. The show notes will provide links and contact information, and we'll be sure we'll have Matt's email address in there so that you can accept the 10-day challenge.
You've been listening to the
This is
Status
Jeff
Go
Dunn
podcast.
for Matt
You can
Walker.
subscribe on
Thank
iTunes
you
or get
very
more
much for
information
listening.
at intervision.com. If you'd like to contribute to the conversation, find Intervision on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Thank you for listening. Until next time.